Welcome to the Bold Claims Podcast with your hosts, Matt Danskin, Daniel Robosky, and Taylor Ammons.
Welcome to this episode of the Bold Claims Podcast, brought to you by the Building Experts Institute. My name is Matt Danskin. Today, we're going to be talking about construction standards and holding your crews accountable to uphold those standards. We're going to talk about my second least favorite tool that you might have in your tool bag right now and what you should do to replace it.
In this world that we're in right now, for us to be able to have unity and bond over this anglerfish that was attempting suicide, just succeeded in suicide.
Well, like I've had fish, and when a fish had a lot of like medical problems, they'll develop a problem with they have like a
buoyancy.
Bladder.
Yep.
Where it like controls their buoyancy so they can go up and down.
So that's what all the scientists are saying, that this was a disease, like the fish had a disease.
Where he's more
Almost like a
buoyant and he
cancer or
can't
something.
help but
Yeah.
to swim up to the surface.
Light thingy that's supposed to be there isn't there. But anyway, it says, this is a white woman posting this, blonde-haired white woman. Close your eyes and just imagine for a minute, just 1 minute, and be her. The feeling that she had to have felt seeing the light for the first time, other than the light of her own. And then leaving this world, oh my God, OMG, big capital letters.
People
This
are the worst.
took me out.
Yeah.
We will never know why she went to the top. Was she sick? Was she scared? Was it a bet? Or was she just lonely, like the most of us, with nothing to lose? Grief? Was it grief? The bravest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
And that's not satire.
No.
That's amazing.
Do you know what the anglerfish do when they breed?
When they breed?
When they breed?
Mhm.
No, nobody should know the answer to that question. But I'll play along. You could make up whatever at this point. I'm going to believe
So
you.
the male will go, and he's tiny compared to her.
How do you know this?
Dude, I
Tism.
am autistic.
Tism.
And
Oh, fair enough.
my fish is one of my specialties. And he will bite and like clamp onto her. And
That's what I do.
and essentially fuses to her.
Okay.
And like he's just like an installation now.
Like a lamprey.
Yeah. and just
So
deadbeat.
he just latches on. He's a blood sucker.
Yeah, he's like a parasite.
Huh.
But then anytime she needs to get pregnant, it's installed already.
Huh.
So essentially,
That fish ain't got no job
These people. This one person's like,
hanging around.
the fish's
Don't get me started.
last dying wish was to experience sunlight. It has no reason to know that sunlight existed.
No, he doesn't care.
And now that I keep watching these, they
now
just
your
keep
algorithm
showing
is
more.
like he loves the anglerfish.
He's crying.
Inspirational
He's crying
names.
right now because
Yeah, give him more.
I'm gonna laugh if you show up with an anglerfish tattoo at some point.
I kind of look. I'm not scared. I'll go get one.
Prove it.
Right.
You pay for it. I'll get it done.
Not worth
That's
it.
a tax write-off?
It can be.
I don't know. It's kind of worth it.
You pay for it then.
I'll pay for it.
Yeah, so I know Sergio recently found out within the last probably year that
He's black.
one of the requirements is like if a building official comes out to the job site, they can ask you to go ahead and produce your installation instructions for whatever it is that you're doing. So if it's like a roof install, they can be like, hey, can you
I think they're
show us the
only.
installation
I think
instructions?
they're only allowed to do that for new builds or complete renovations, repair, because roof replacements fall under the repair side of IBC. I don't think they can ask for a roof repair like that. I think it's only a new
Yeah,
build.
I
And
don't know.
if you're doing a structural change,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I don't know, and it might be somewhere in chapter 1 or something like that, but it kind of says upon request you have to be able to produce any of the installation manuals. But I don't
Pull
know.
it up on your phone.
Correct. I mean, it's just literally like, I mean, we have ours all kind of hanging out in a Google Drive anyways, and so yeah, I mean, you could just pull up
yeah.
any of those.
I think that's kind of a rarity though.
Yeah,
We've had-
I've always thought it was interesting that most of the installation instructions are English, Spanish, and then like French is usually the
Canadians.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wondered where that came from.
Those fucking Canucks.
Yep, the old Canadian.
I saw a funny comedian talking about his Canadian co-workers that he was like basically ranting against. He's like, get rid of the immigrants. But he's talking about Canadians. And then like it got taken to HR, and then he just like kept escalating it and like
That's so
I'm gonna have to look
funny.
that up.
yeah, I'll try to find that one. So speaking of interesting pieces of content,
Yeah.
we've got one I want you guys to check out. Again, found on TikTok. And I want to say that this is in like Australia or something, but I'm not totally sure where this happened.
Is it snakes?
It's not snakes.
The hail is like baseballs here. It is ruining our house. We've got holes in the roof everywhere. They are the size of baseballs. Holy
I don't think I'm just
Oops,
hanging
don't
out.
mind the broken couch. This piece of hail came through the roof. I don't know if you can see, but everyone's houses have had hail.
Those are like tile
Go
roofs that are
through
just
the
obliterated.
roof.
Good Lord.
But to go through the tile and through the insulation and the
Yeah, the
drywall.
decking.
Inside.
I've
the
seen
decking,
that
yeah.
one time.
Yeah, I've never seen it. And I've seen some pretty big hail.
Just
Well,
going to give you a
I've
quick
never
view
seen
of
that,
our
but
newly
I've
installed
met
sun
An
light.
adjuster one time that said he was
Sunroof?
writing hail damage to hardwood
Look at all
floors
that natural light coming
in a
in.
hailstorm because it was
Gorgeous.
breaking through so
Why didn't we do this earlier?
much. That's nuts.
I worked the Wiley hailstorm in Texas in 2015 or whatever it was. And this lady had her house was just built. The U-Haul was in the driveway. She had gotten the keys that day. Hailstorm hit and went through the ceiling, went through the roof, through the decking, through the drywall, and was shattering countertops. But they had 4.5 inch hail. Like it was cannonballs falling from the sky. But we were writing stuff for hail claim for countertops and flooring. It was that's the only time I've ever seen it.
Wow.
But this lady had just gotten the keys. Like the movers were moving stuff in, the storm started, and they all dipped out, and the U-Haul truck got destroyed out in the driveway.
Man.
Like they were doing contents and everything.
Got the policy period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good that it was.
Man.
But I mean, it was leaving holes in the. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I don't feel
rocketed
like
into
I would probably record it, but I would probably be like under my dining room table.
Right. Yeah. Let me
You
get
know,
under
if-
another layer of something.
Yeah, I don't know
Because
that I'm just
little
confidently
hailstones
just
hurt. I got caught in a hailstorm on my bike in Sturgis one year
Oh,
with no helmet or nothing, and just getting rocketed. I mean, and I've got video.
I
of it.
remember
I'll show-
Colorado Springs at the zoo.
that might be what's wrong.
It popped up real quick, and all these people had bruises all over
Oh, yeah.
their shoulders and
Wow.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I had glasses on, so nothing hit me. Like I had a few go off my glasses, and they, if you're riding, you're not wearing just regular sunglasses.
Right.
I always wore the ballistic ones, but I had a big welt on my forehead.
How big was
shoulders.
the hailstorm?
I mean, it was
Well,
probably.
and you're driving however
you're
right.
fast.
Yeah, and you're like,
coming
I
into
got to
it.
go slower because I don't want to get beat up by the hail, but I want to go faster so I could get out of the
out
hailstorm.
of it.
Like we ended up pulling off the side of the road on the tree. I mean, it was probably that size hail. I mean,
yeah,
it wasn't
big enough that it
big enough
was
to hurt.
hurting. Yeah,
And
probably like paintballs.
there's
or
like
something.
20
Yeah,
of
you hit
us
a beetle
hiding.
going too
Yeah.
fast in that.
Oh yeah,
Right. Yeah, no, I've had
Yeah.
some June
I've had
bugs
one
and
hit me in the
cat-
throat.
yeah. Bugs hurt, man.
Yep.
But
Yeah, that's
not a dent on my Harley, by the way. Whoever designed the clear coat and paint for Harleys,
Aerodynamic
hail
enough.
resistant apparently.
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll show
I
you
could-
guys the video one day. I've
Yeah.
got it on my phone.
We
But
had-
just
I-
dinging off the bike.
I've never seen it come through the roof, but I did have, you're talking about like it was that immediate. We had a roof that we finished at like 4:00 and like 5:30 got hit with like 2.5 inch hail.
Yep.
And they were not, super pleased about that, but
What happens
This is
hypothetically, like if that hailstorm had came through halfway through your build? Like, how does that tend to play
I don't know.
out?
Yeah. That's a question for the PA.
So there's
Yeah.
a lot of
Let's talk about that.
circumstances there. So I've had one where we had the roof open and a microburst happened
Mm.
and flooded the entire inside of the house. Completely new peril, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
a new claim or whatever. But
Okay.
But it's not
depending-
necessarily damaging the roof, is it? Or
Well, now
No.
let me ask you, who becomes liable? Because
Well-
if the roof covering was in place, the water would have not gotten into the structure.
This is where the term sudden and incidental comes into play.
I can imagine.
Or sudden and accidental
I was going to say, I was
Sorry.
like,
splatter.
Yeah.
the one that we had, we ended up having to pay for a lot of it because the roof was open because we had opened it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Now it's your liability.
Yeah, and there's no way to forecast microbursts.
Right.
Right. But that's where like your builder's risk policy and stuff kicks in, and there's ways around that. But in something like what he's talking about, like it's just another peril.
Turn around, file a new claim.
Sorry, you're going to get to pay your deductible again.
Yeah. And I think in that case, it was like, a $1,000 deductible. It wasn't that big of a deal. They probably got dinged on, how many claims they were filing, but
yeah, which is only internal to those carriers, right? Like it's not like your car insurance where accidents and stuff stick with you forever. It's like they can move from carrier to carrier if they so chose. It's on your driver's license, like those kind of.
So the LexisNexis doesn't follow.
No, it's no, because your rates aren't determined by that, right? So you get a score against your insurability, right? Yeah. But your rates, they're going to gauge their risk, but your rates are determined geographically. So like if you move to an area that's, has a low likelihood of a storm event or whatever, then you're going to pay a premium appropriate to that space. You're not going to raise the rates of that premium because you're,
right. But just in terms of your insurability, it's not going to be affected.
The insurability can be, rate isn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're either going to,
I would imagine.
They're either going to insure you or not.
They may only sell you a policy that is a different tier or whatever that matches your insurability. Okay. Yeah. And that would affect the rate.
Yes, by secondarily, yes, but not just on its onset. You're not just going to be like, hey, you have a higher rate because you happen to live in a place where there's been a tornado.
Right.
You know what I mean? They don't,
right.
You're not being.
Oh, so more like act of God type claims. Yeah, I would imagine if Matt had
arson,
3,
then
Yep. Yeah. Then their
I always
would
explain it as like if you have cats and candles and you keep burning your house down, they're going to penalize you for that.
Yep.
If you live in Louisiana and you keep getting hit by hurricanes, is what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you're already paying a higher rate because geographically you're prone, like floodplains and the entire middle of the United States and tornadoes and shit like that. But you're still insurable, and the rate's going to be pretty generic across the board. They're just gauging their risk against you.
Yeah.
So
makes sense. Well, today on our show, I wanted to talk about proper installation methods, and not only like knowing what those are, but maintaining accountability and standards of making sure that those things are happening every time. So I know that's more of a contractor shift, but I think it's important as we're discussing anything with claims at whatever stage, that the way that construction happens, or even the way that the construction is estimated, needs to be accounted for. With you guys at your installation side of things, what are you doing to, I guess, control that process, to educate and know how to do that right, but then to make sure that it's happening? Because we all know, like, sometimes, you have crews that are changing, or, even the crews that you're used to, if they're not supervised, if they're not watched, corners will get cut, things will get skipped, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So we ultimately lay out the standard based off of what's required by the building code department, what is required by the particular manufacturer, and then what are some things that we've kind of incorporated in along the way to make sure that the systems are nice and tight. And so that all starts with educating the sales reps with how a roof is put together, because then they can better understand when they're looking at an issue that needs to be repaired, how to scope that repair, how the actual assembly works together and fits together. Because I mean, that's they call a roof a roofing system for that reason, because all of those components are designed to work in and amongst one another to create the full system that then does its job of shedding water off of the structure. And so when I was choosing manufacturers, I went and scoured through their installation instructions, because I wanted to know who had the most stringent installation requirements, because obviously a majority of the work that we do is insurance related, but I also wanted the most bulletproof system possible. And, they're all of the manufacturers are, constantly trying to make improvements to make their company and their products better or the best that's on the market. We personally will use GAF, and their installation instructions are very clear. It goes into the decking requirements, and then the having appropriate rating and grade stamps on that decking. They go into obviously whether, I don't like to do this, but whether it's allowable to do a second layer over the top of that product or strip it all the way down to the roof decking. But then so we want to train on all of that. We want to leverage Building Experts Institute with the in-depth training inside of there so that they can see how it's done, because, those videos take the installation instructions for GAF and put them on absolute steroids. And, the instructor Phil on that does an incredible job to walk through and make the installation process make sense. But then, we have to have a project manager out there keeping eyes on that job, because my crews have been with me for a long time, and I know a lot of guys that have crews that have been with them years and years and years. But I'm not as concerned about the crew. But if there's one or two individuals on that crew that are not doing things the way that they're required to be done, that can create a nightmare on the back end. If this one guy's nail gun's turned up too high and he's blasting through the shingles, or this one guy is not driving a flush fastener, so he's got angle driven fasteners on every shingle that he installs, we're going to have big issues out of that roof. And so having somebody on site to be able to verify all of that, but even before the materials get laid, I want to make sure, using checklists, that we're checking in all of that material and making sure that we didn't get any lots that have been mixed that's going to cause a noticeable appearance issue. But also, we've explained to the customer ahead of time that there's different discoloration issues that can be seen when roofs are first installed that can make it appear that they're different shades, and that's all very normal. It's very normal for some of the granules to be coming off for the first little bit. If it's a cooler day, it's very normal for the roof to have a little bit of a wave to it until it lays flat and bonds nice and tight. And just making sure that everybody follows the checklists that are provided. The project managers are ensuring that everything is being communicated over to the homeowner about what's being done, and that we're documenting the install from start to finish. Whether that's an insurance claim or a retail claim or a retail file, I want to know how every bit of that roof was put together so that we know it's nice and tight. I can go back through, or any of the other management team can go back through and audit any install that happened to make sure that it was done adequately. If the homeowners have any issues, we can go through and verify that, hey, this was done super tight, or this was not. And then it allows us to also be able to hold our crew accountable if they did something wrong. We can make sure that they handle it, they get it situated, and then we'll typically give our crew 48 to 72 hours to get out and fix a workmanship issue on the project, or we'll deploy somebody else out and just back charge to the subcontractors. Because if we have an issue, I don't really care about what's coming up on the production calendar. I want that past client fixed. I don't want to put another roof on if it's going to cause this customer to have to continue having this issue. So that's the best way that we approach it. And then I just encourage my production department to continuously learn, find ways that we can improve, find ways that we can be more efficient, and let's maximize and create a white glove experience for our customers, because that's the last part of the puzzle. ultimately is we need to go through and crush that install to create a raving fan that'll want to refer us.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of customer service things that you can do along the way, but that roof is what they're going to be left with for, after you're done with this customer. I think I told you about, I had another company that has actually gone through the BEI training. Like they went through the installation course, and what we try to do with that, the manufacturers, especially GAF, have some good installation videos and all that sort of stuff, but they really focus on their shingles, right? And not so much about how they interact with the sidewalls and the flashings and crickets and all the different things that are really important for you to know, right? Like just, hey, you're installing shingles, here's how you cut your buck. All right, that's cool, that's important, but we wanted to take it another step further. But these guys had a really nice roof that they installed on a really nice house, and we're like, yeah, we've gone through all the videos, we know how to do this right, we our guys have been trained, like they're good to go, we've got a guy on site. And they were what I would say like a perfect case study for company cam, because they don't use company cam, and they've been trying to diagnose this leak for months now, and they've done like attempting repairs at different things to try to fix it. And I think they ultimately have it fixed now. They had to go basically take a bunch of stuff up, but it would have been a lot easier to solve and figure out had they had all their photos together. Because what they found was they had a guy on site who was there, but he wasn't necessarily watching every detail. And so there was an area around, it was actually like a false chimney that they have on this really nice house on a golf course that was had ice and water around it on the cricket and all that, and they didn't replace the ice and water. Okay, you're probably okay. They put their synthetic, and then they did a new course ice and water, probably be okay. Turns out they weren't, but like that's the thing is like, yeah, a lot of times it's going to be okay, but you've got to do it because every once in a while it's not going to be okay.
Right.
And then the other thing was we started looking at the photos of the flashing because we're trying to figure out where the heck is this water coming in. And they used coil metal for the step. And so they've got like a couple of different pieces of it, like
broke it on
like
a break
strips of it. Yeah. And I'm looking at it and I'm like trying to figure out, from these photos that we got off somebody's cell phone.
Right.
I'm like, what is going on here? And they're like, oh, well, that should actually be better because it's like one continuous piece of metal. I was like, yes and no, because you have to nail it down. And the whole point of step is that you've got part of it is covering where the nails are for the one below it. And so when you do it this way, your nails aren't covered and you got, nails through the metal, the water follows the nail. There's your leak. And so it was, I've screwed up just about every way you can figure out how to screw up a roof over time, but I feel like I would continue to find new ways, but so I don't want to put the guys on blast. They really did a great job of just going, hey, we are going to figure this out, we're going to take care of our customers. So have a lot of respect for that. But it is really tough where even if you know the right thing, even if you have somebody on site, they've got to be like really watching the crews closely, because it can be one guy that goes, oh, no, I can just use some trim metal here, some coil metal, and
or a can.
This will be better. Yeah.
I've seen
cut
a
beer
can
and
used for like a little piece of a corner flashing on a dormer where they transitioned around, and it was wild.
Yeah. So on the estimating side, on the front end, because that's really where you live more often, right? What are your thoughts on that in terms of holding those construction standards and how you're estimating? Because I do see you've got both sides of it. You got guys that are overestimating, right? Like they're throwing everything, the kitchen sink at it, with no intention of ever doing any of this kind of work. And then you've got guys that hey, let's just get the roof and let's not worry about doing the flashings, because then we're going to have to pull the siding. We're going to have to paint the siding. We're going to have to do all this.
Right.
Let's just go for the roof.
I think, again, I mean, education on any of these things is always going to be the first thing, right? It's like you can't expect somebody to functionally perform a task without educating them on it first. And estimating in our industry has become that thing where it's just like, I went online and I watched a bunch of YouTube videos on how to run Xactimate or Symbility, and I either hate it because I can never get the dollar amount that I think I deserve on this job, right? My profit margins are always low, or
in which case you don't know how to use Symbility or Xactimate or Symbility.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the opposite end of that spectrum is, to your point, the people who just overestimate everything, and they have 800 hours of supervisor time and all this other stuff, and they follow the old school, like, I bought all these macros from this dude who knew estimating 10 years ago and hasn't done anything since the Cold War. Like, there's that type of people. And then
I know who you're talking about there.
You can't do anything with that shit either.
Yeah.
So actually understanding how to build something, having contractor knowledge and combining that with estimating is huge. Because if you know what you actually are going to put on the building, you can estimate it appropriately, right? You can put all of the ancillary line items in there. You don't need all the F9 notes and all the other junk that you see so many people with their macros and stuff do. It's like, there's value to some of those things in certain scenarios, but by and large, it's like, I'm putting a roof system on. I'm going to use underlayment. I'm going to use ice and water. I'm going to use step flashing. I'm going to use counter flashing sometimes. So I'm going to use drip edge or gutter apron. I'm going to use actual starter course. Like, all of those things, put them in there and you'll get the appropriate amount that you need for the estimating side. But what we see a lot of times, we get estimates from contractors and they're very vague, and it'll be like, roof, $50,000. And you're like, okay, why? Is it cut up? How much waste did you guys calculate for? Is there this? Is there that? And they're like,
how many square feet of this? How many linear feet of that?
Most of the time they have no clue. And, cool. If you're writing a retail bid and you're just trying to get the homeowner, they don't care that you're going to build a Cricut, right? They don't care that you're going to go do any of these things that are kind of above and beyond. But if you're trying to get an insurance company to pay for them, they have to be appropriate. We also see a lot of the stuff where it's like, this is OSHA compliant. Okay, that's the cost of you doing business. And it goes back to the wear and tear argument we were talking about before, where there is the cost of doing business. I'm not charging the insurance company for all of my guys' cougar paws, and I'm not charging the insurance company for this, handful of other little things. But if I'm going to be expected to do certain things because of the complexity of the job, then I am going to charge them. If I need to have a leading edge supervisor because it's more than 37 feet off the ground, and OSHA says that you have to have somebody there that their sole job is that. If it's a requirement, then cool. But not just because you want to leave one of your supervisors out there for 8 hours a day, right? Because if the only job that dude is supervising is the one that you guys are working on, that tells me that you don't even have the need nor necessity to hire a supervisor, because you have one job. If you only have one job that dude's got to look at every day, you don't need him, right? So there's some of those arguments where it's like, there's the common sense element of it, and then there's the technical side of it that sometimes those get blurred and they lose them a little bit. But I think for us, we've always been able to live in that space where we understand the construction knowledge side of things and the PA side. So when we're estimating, I've written tens of millions of dollars worth of estimates over the years, and I've only ever had one get really in question, where it was like, in court, they're like, well, why'd you use this line item? And the person asking me the questions didn't even know how to use Xactimate, so I was able to win the argument. But, having both of those skill sets live synonymously in the same venue for us to make money has worked out really well. But you have to educate the people, because to what you were saying, if I have a guy who understands how roofs are put together, when they start to tear roofs off and they know the general construction knowledge of things, they can see when the guy before them didn't install it correctly.
Right.
They can notice that was an inside out Mountain Dew can instead of, actual flashing. Like, you can see these things and be like, oh, this is something we're going to have to address. If they don't have any knowledge of it, like when I was first selling roofs, like, it's a gray roof, it's a brown roof, that's all I needed to know. If I got up on the roof and started looking at flashings and all sorts of other stuff, I'd have no clue what the hell I was looking at.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said something, and I wanted to say it before it slipped my mind. But because there are some people in the industry that really push a lump sum type model, and it's roof for $50,000. But what a lot of contractors aren't aware of is sometimes the policy will actually explain how that estimate is required to be written, and it's typically a line itemized estimate with quantities, measurements, pricing, tax. Ultimately they're describing Xactimate.
I think a lot of that's reasonable though. Like
I do too.
Hey, roof $50,000.
Yeah, just show me how we got there.
Yeah, like
I don't care what it is.
Exactly.
The problem was, 10 years ago or whatever it was, when lump sum pricing was so big, their policy language didn't delineate that. So it was just like there was verbiage in there somewhere of like, if you have a contractor and you have a signed contract with Paragon Roofing and they're the ones doing the work, you get a certain leniency there to dictate the price of things because you were already contracted before we got involved, right? That's where they were able to pull that fast one on the carriers. Now they're like, cool, you still owe me an itemized estimate. And I think it's reasonable to ask that. The guys who are stomping their feet and standing, it's the same line of thought of like, well, you don't get to tell me how to run my business. You're right, but I'm only going to give this homeowner $37,000 for this. What you're saying, it's $50,000. So
if you want the 50, you need to show me why.
If you want to,
correct. Well, and then some people that want to go the cost incurred route, policies are changing to where I can't remember the carrier, but there's one that says we'll pay our price. So it doesn't, because some say
the lesser.
It usually says it says something along the lines of like a reasonable cost to do it, right? And then, or if they have like preferred contractors and things like that, because the carrier can't dictate price. So it'll never say our price necessarily, but it'll say some version of like this predetermined weird thing out in the ethos that nobody's going to talk about, right? It's it's saying the same thing. They're just language is different.
Yeah, and then they always like to work into what you were going to say, like the lesser of,
like the incurred cost or
the maximum policy limits, this, or the chuck in a truck down the road that's willing to waive your deductible,
Yeah, and but that goes into governance, right? And I'm a huge advocate for licensure. Like if you look at the states that don't require licensing for contractors, they're
a mess.
They're a mess. I mean, they really are. And it's crazy to me because you take a state like Texas, right? They have no general contractor licensing at the state level, but then there's municipalities that require business registration and contractor registration at that level. But then for HVAC, electrical, plumbing, wind turbine installation, all the other junk, there's license requirements there, but just not general contracting. So the guy building the skyscrapers in downtown Dallas doesn't have to have a GC license, but the guy running the lights at AT&T Stadium does, right? Like it's just, there's a weird, it's a weird goulash of things over there. But then you take Tennessee. Tennessee has 4 million different license classifications. And if you only want 5 or less of them, you don't have to take an exam, but you do have to get your license. But if you want the 6th one, you have to have a license.
And then, or if you're bidding, if you're bidding on anything over $25,000 or $25,000 and up, and then it also kicks you over.
Limit.
Then it kicks you over to the jurisdiction because Metro Nashville, Davidson County has like a home improvement license that you can get, so you can perform up to like a $2,999 repair, but then that $3,000 to $24,999.
What do you think the contractor base is doing? Congratulations. Everything I'm doing is $2,999.99.
Yeah. Right. With
3
different contracts.
I've seen guys that are doing multiple part contracts to keep under that $25,000 limit. And I don't know like how the homeowners,
it's a handyman thing here,
aren't thinking like, hey, this is a huge red flag. Well, and you want to do this one project on 3 separate contracts?
Yep. Well, it's an education thing. Again, it's if I've developed a rapport with a homeowner or a property owner, and I say, hey, I have to do a different contract for each one of these buildings on this apartment complex, they're going to be like, I could see where that would make sense.
Yeah.
If it doesn't seem too crazy to them, then they just kind of accept.
Like a big residential house, they're like, I need to do your roof in 3 parts.
Yeah. I mean,
or if we're going to do, we're going to use subcontractors for your gutters. So I have to have a different contract for that. And then they lose $8,000 of gutters on that total cost and then siding. But then you take a state like Florida where I have a CGC license in Florida. So it's a certified general contractor license.
Okay.
I can build something, but I have to use a subcontractor that's got a certified roofing license. So I have to, I as a CGC have to use a guy with a CCC license. I can't do the roof, but I can be the prime contractor on the job, but I got to hire him because he's got that. Now I can get that license. So I can either go through the headache of getting 20 different licenses, or I can just get the CGC and then I can sub out all these guys, but he can't do anything more than a roof on one of those jobs. Like the way I'm a fan of governance. However,
Hallett Stone is not always the best.
No, and God forbid you go to a Commonwealth. Go to Virginia, go to Kentucky, go to Massachusetts and try to get your contractor license.
Is it a mess?
Nightmare.
Yeah, well, and it drives me just absolutely nuts, the amount of contractors that we all know that know they need to have some sort of licensure for what they're doing, and they know that they're not doing it the way it's exactly designed to be done and still don't care. Yeah. That really bothers me.
Well,
like I have guys that I'm close with that will call me and like they'll be like, "Hey, whenever I go to do a roof on my personal house, I want to have you help because we don't do any of the stuff that you do." And they're doing like, tens of millions of or 8 figures in revenue, and they're just taking old shingles off, putting new shingles on, but like it just feels like there's no pride in what they're doing.
That's because those are sales organizations, not construction organizations.
Correct.
And that's it.
Correct.
Right? Because think about this too. You were talking about it a minute ago. Of like, if I use a certain manufacturer and their specifications, they're all relatively close, right? Does the crew care if you drop off OC or GAF or TAMCO?
Well, and that's the thing. The crew's going to put on.
They're going to do it the way that they've been taught to do it.
The crew's going to put on what's on that pallet. And,
which is why most of your manufacturer requirements for warranty are just the use of materials for the most part. That's the number one prerequisite is like what was GAF's used to be like 5 of 7 components or something like, whatever something that like was. That. They had their specification of how you should install their stuff. But to warranty
even if you do it wrong, we're still going to warranty it.
As long as you use 5 of 7 components. And I might be wrong on my numbers, but it was some
version
of that.
Now it's like that for their System Plus. There's a certain number of components, but if you don't, then the basic warranty is still active for these other components. Because
all they ever
and things
gave a
like
shit
that.
for you to do is just send in your material order from ABC that said storm guard this.
GAF doesn't even ask for that. Atlas did. You had to upload your invoices, but GAF, nope. You just go tell them what's on there. Now, Atlas at the time was not charging for the warranty registration. GAF does at like $80 a pop for the System Plus, at least for a certified contractor with GAF. But yeah, I wish that there was more regulations on the actual installation, whether it be some sort of permitting or some sort of inspections or something like that, because, we've got a customer right now that has leaks at every single penetration on his roof. It's like 2 skylights, a few HVAC furnace pipe jacks, and a couple pipe boots, but every one of them are leaking. And the shingles are probably 8-9 years old, and the roof wasn't built to code, and there's 3 dormers on the front of the house. All of those have little leaks going around, and just because the contractor that did this roof about 8 years ago decided that they wanted to simply take the old roof off and put a new roof on, this homeowner is going to be out of pocket almost $40,000 to replace this roof to actually do it right, and they've got USAA, and we're asking if there was any way they could engage USAA, and there's no storm related damages on this home.
USAA used to be amazing before they bought Allcat. Like before Allcat existed, we used to love, you got a USAA policy, you're like, perfect. They'd show up out there and be like, we're gonna buy the roof and the garage door and We're gonna re-landscape their yard.
You want to look at any of it? Nah.
Nah, we're good. We're like,
You get some photos you can send me?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the funny thing is you've got the sales organizations that don't know about install, don't care about install, don't like any of those things. But really, if you're the guy that cares about those details, which are, like we said, the product that they're left with, you've got a lot better leg to stand on to sell these people, right? Like, you know, especially if you're in a door knocking situation, they're talking to 10 different guys and, you know, they're getting bids or whatever. Like the guy that truly understands, hey, we need to make sure, you know, this is part of my bid that we need to do the flashings this way, or we're going to do it this, you know, we're going to do all these different things, and explains it, even if the customer doesn't necessarily comprehend everything that they're talking about, but they show that they're competent. They show that they know those things, which you can't do unless you actually know them. It's a lot easier to sell when they go, oh, this guy knows what the details are. He's paying attention to the details for me. So I don't have to worry about it. So I'm not that guy with a failing roof after 8 years.
Yeah. I want the homeowners to Google me, you know, look me up and watch some of the videos that we've done just explaining how we operate and what we do. Because if I'm going to be up next to another roofer in Nashville and the homeowner Googles both of us and they see dozens and dozens and dozens of videos of me explaining how these components work together, why it's so critical, and then they Google this guy and there's nothing, that customer has a lot higher likelihood that they're going to choose to work with us because, you know, we are the experts in that sense. You know, I don't even like using the word expert for myself because I always want to learn and continue to be a student. But yeah, I mean, it's massive. I want people to look into that because I am passionate about it, but I'm not everybody's cup of tea either. You know, I don't want to be everybody's contractor. I want to make sure that the people that want that white glove experience that decide to work with us, they'll get that. But we're human. We make mistakes too, and we want to make sure we can stand behind it. But if I'm doing the roofs the way they're designed to be installed and I'm documenting that and I have somebody out there making sure that it's all done and I'm stopping by to make sure everything's working out nicely, you know, so that somebody is out there majority of the time, then we're going to provide a better experience.
Yeah.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate for a second.
Come on.
Because I love this game. So if you are going out and selling a roof system and you're like, hey, I'm going to use the entire OC, Atlas, whoever, right? And the cost for you to do that is a little bit higher than, say, your competition.
Yep.
The policy only says that it's required to pay for like, kind, and quality. And you come out and you say, hey, well, we're going to offer this full warranty, but our price is $10,000 more. Yep. Should the carrier cover that? Because it's technically like, kind, and quality?
So I would say no, you know, because in the way that I'll always explain it is, hey, look, typically how it works at my house with my policy is the insurance company is typically going to pay me for what I currently have up there. So, you know, I probably have standard felt paper, and so they would pay for that. I have a 3-tab shingle, so they would pay to put back a 3-tab shingle on there. Now, you know, there's certain items like a drip edge that I showed you when we were, you know, building this roof that isn't currently on there, but would be required now. And in the event that you know, the insurance company agrees to replace the whole roof, there may be some items that they do like a paid when incurred type thing. So they want to make sure we actually do it and then it gets put on there and they may pay those. Or let's say that it's not covered and then it's like, hey, you know, your out-of-pocket expenses, your deductible plus, you know, any sort of items that you want to choose to upgrade, or if the project requires any code items that are not being included, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it. And then let the homeowners know that, hey, we're going to go through and get all of your items brought up to code, And so if there is a massive like $10,000 price difference, then we need to revisit that, because you don't have to use us, but I'm only going to be estimating for all of the reasonable and necessary items to complete this project. And so if there's a massive price difference, it's typically because something got left off, or maybe I fat fingered something. So I want to make sure that we can revisit that and see. But ultimately, we're going to make sure that we go through and do it the way that the manufacturer requires. And so let's say hypothetically in this scenario, I'm replacing the roof that we're estimating now, and I've got dormers all over it with hardy board. Then I know that most of the other contractors they're going to get estimates from are not going to be doing the work at the sidewalls that need to be done. So I want to make sure that I can show the value of that before we get to the estimate. Like, let me show you the way that your sidewalls are currently built. Let me show you the way they're required to be done. And let me show you why this is so critical. That way, and best case scenario, they're leaking at their dormers. And so
There's
I'm like,
nobody
hey,
going to pay attention to that argument more than somebody who's already replacing the roof prematurely because it was done wrong once.
100%. But if I know that that's not one of their hot buttons, I need to make it hot, because that's going to add a lot of cost to that project. And I need to make sure that they're bought in on the importance of that, especially if it's a claim, because I'll be able to provide the documentation, but they're going to have to put their foot down to the carrier that, hey, this work has to be done.
Right.
Because, what I tend to hear a lot, and I kind of believe it, is you're one of the only contractors that asks us for this. And I don't disagree with it on when I'm like,
They'll
hey,
say that about starter though.
100%, but I don't disagree with it when it goes into, pulling hardy off or anything like that. I know that there's contractors all over the country that do it the right way, but I would say majority do it the way that the crew just does it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things we ask for. Like, we ask homeowners, like, do you have an existing warranty from the system that's on here? And sometimes they do, right? Because we're going to use that in the negotiation process with their carrier. Be like, now I understand that you're giving like the baseline 30-year shingle general construction stuff, but these guys had a full warranted system through GAF that it has all these components. So you have to pay for comparable stuff, right? It's worth asking, just because it can negate some of the pushback when you're dealing with the carrier on certain things.
I don't know, like, if they say they've got a mix match, they've got a bargain shingle, they've got whatever,
which is what most people have.
But it's a 30-year, it's 15-pound felt, it's whatever. It's kind of bare bones basic, right? But the insurance company owes to replace that with like, kind, and quality. Now, if I go sell them on a full system of whatever, top tier brand of shingle, I don't know that, like, if they don't have that warranty in place or whatever, I don't know that we include that warranty. But I think doing that full system product,
it's a sellable point.
And that being, priced, fairly and accurately, I don't think that's an unfair way to do it. Yeah, you had a, factory seconds roof, before, and now you've got a major manufacturer.
I don't disagree with it from a salesman's perspective. And if the
but in
roofing
terms
company,
of the insurance company paying for it,
I don't think it's unreasonable to ask.
Yeah.
But I think it's unreasonable to expect that they're going to pay for it, right? Unless there's a reason, right?
What's the reason not to, though?
Well,
what's the reason?
Because everything is about cost cutting.
Sure.
Right? So,
but I mean, in terms of like a legitimate reason, this is why we don't owe for that cost.
Because it's not like, kind, and quality anymore. If you're saying, if I have we're going to use the example that you use, if I have a 30-year shingle, 15-pound felt, standard ridge, not Z ridge, no high profile stuff, just
those are all upgrades that the customer should be paying for.
And we're saying, I want the warranted version of this, that it should be a comparable cost if you're getting apples for apples, right? But nobody, not at least nowadays, is going to install 15-pound felt. Yeah. Right? They're at a minimum, they're going to use 30, and I'm even surprised if they do that. Right? It's going to be synthetic, but the point
felt's
is
a minor,
but it's
price difference. Yeah, yeah.
$2,000 on a job, right? I mean, this is where it gets a little blurry, right?
Sure.
Because comparable, if I could go to you and you say it's going to cost me $17,000 to do this roof exactly the way it sits right now, and you say it'll cost me $20,000 to do it with a warranty. Well, you as the homeowner, 100% is going to want the warranty. That warranty doesn't mean anything to the carrier. It's a manufacturer's warranty. The likelihood of you exercising that warranty is this, right? I mean, I would love to pull the statistics of claimable events compared to manufacturer warranties, right? I mean,
I've talked to manufacturers.
Sure
the warranties are almost complete pure profit.
And most of them are voided within the first 90 days by some sort of weather event, some sort of too much direct sunlight, some sort of 62 mile an hour wind gust, or who knows what it is. So when we're talking about that now, if you're saying that I have to upgrade from 15-pound felt because the city says I can no longer do it, then we're having an ordinance and law conversation. And the carrier, most adjusters misinterpret the use of O&L against a claim.
They sure do.
So how about this? So when I was in Denver, I dealt with a lot of contractors who would offer a free Class 4 upgrade. And that is one thing that I just could not stand. And not because I couldn't compete with it or anything like that, but for the fact that they spend all this time telling the carrier, you don't pay enough, you don't pay enough, you don't pay enough. And then they go give the customer a product that's not like kind of quality, that is an upgrade.
It's like double the price.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
because
it's $20 difference.
But they got a deal.
A square.
They worked out a new deal with
30 maybe.
It's way
for
more.
just
It may depend on your market. Just the shingle.
Yeah, just the shingle. But that's because they worked out a deal with their manufacturer, and they're now getting Class 4 for the price that he's getting 30 years.
Most of the guys were doing the Class 4 with the cheapest brands on the market
at the time.
And so they were like, all right, I'll do it for the same price as
There's
this other guy.
manufacturer that's how they were trying to keep their head above water, was they lowered the price of their higher end stuff for about 2 years, and then they're still around, but they're not doing a whole lot anywhere in the country. They got their name up on some billboards in Kansas City and stuff, but the misinterpretation of how O&L is applied changes a lot of this conversation too, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're using proper means and methods, and a city requires a certain, if they adopt an agent or adopt an IBC or an IRC in the middle of you doing construction, like there's still an option for you to make those changes. It's almost like the mold conversation in insurance policy. If there's a cap on it, if it's the primary cause, right? So you couldn't, if you were trying to insure a property and the primary cause for this claim is because of a code or ordinance change to make it up to code, then there's a cap.
Yeah.
But if we're having to change something out and we can't put back the comparable because code says we can't, then the O&L kicks in. But they don't look at it that way. They're like, well, no, you can't. And it's really only the difference, but they apply it wrong all the time. They're like, oh, you got a $10,000 cap, you're capped at $10,000. It's like, no, I understand, but I'm using $1,500 for the felt and $2,500 for the ridge cap, whatever it is, decking. And that's the problem, is it's usually decking is what everybody wants to argue O&L on, is decking. And, depending on how they word the language in the policy will determine whether they're going to pay for it or not. Doesn't matter. You still have to put it on. Yeah. And I've seen contractors just put their feet in concrete and they're like, I'm not putting this on until the carrier pays for it. It's like, so you're going to leave the homeowner's house open?
Right. We ran into a situation in Fort Collins, Colorado, where they had a major hailstorm. It was the peril for this particular claim. And then the city decided to adopt a Class 4 requirement. But it was after the event, and we actually ended up getting it covered. It was on a large, multi-million-dollar claim, but it was in question for for a little while in terms of whether or not they were going to pay for that enforcement that wasn't in place at the time of the peril.
I had that happen on a tornado claim in Greenville, Texas. It was a $25 million all-in claim, and in the middle of reconstruction they adopted 2017. They went from like 2012 to 2017, and a lot of things changed. The decking requirements, the
2018.
No, this would have been 17.
Okay.
So from 2012 to 2017, there was a change.
Okay.
And then the abatement procedures for asbestos containing materials was different. There was a lot of ACMs in there with on the VCT tile and stuff like that. So like all of these things changed. Then all of a sudden you're like,
Who? Yeah.
in the middle.
We
of
have to
this?
do it, and
In the
who's going to
middle?
pay for it?
Yeah, because I mean we're 7-8 months into the project at that
How
point.
does that work? What
Which part?
happened?
What do you mean?
So codes change. You're in
Oh.
the middle of the project. What happens?
Depends on the city, really. I mean, how they change over. So some cities will adopt and they'll say, we're going to go to 2018, 29, whatever year they want to jump to, because they don't write them every year.
4
Did
year
you already have
chunks.
every 3 years?
Yeah.
Did you
So maybe
guys?
it would've
Did they
been
already have their
2015.
permit for it, or
I don't know, maybe it was
because that's
3 years.
sometimes how it's determined? Is
Yeah,
like
that's it. It's
you
like
already had
sometimes
your
they're
permit,
grandfathered.
and so you don't have to do the new
So
codes.
we didn't have the permits for everything that was in there. We had the general permit because the
Mhm.
carrier was still investigating the loss, and so like we were finding more things, and then we wanted to tarp the roof, but then they wouldn't. They didn't want to pay for tarping, and so then it rained again, and then water intruded, flooded the whole thing, which then ended up leading to us tearing up flooring, which got us to the VCT. I mean, it was a
Can the policyholder not just say we're tarping anyways because I have to protect my property?
I don't know that
according
you've
to my
worked with a
duties
lot
after
of
a loss
churches.
or something. Do what?
I don't know that you've worked with a lot of churches.
Oh,
But getting them fools to make a decision and or spend money is like pulling teeth.
I believe it's
They
the
just-
Lord's money.
Yeah, man. They are stingy with it, and everything's trial by committee. So it's not like you're just dealing with one person, especially in like a Texas mega church, right? Like you're not going to, the little Baptist church down here that holds 100 people, where you could get Pastor Jim to sign off on whatever. Like everything there's trial by committee, and you're not getting those people to agree to anything ever. So
Interesting.
Yeah. What do y'all think the amount of roofing contractors will
7.
use actually could explain exactly how their product's supposed to be installed? Like, I know with GAF they've got the ProField guide, or let's just use the Timberline HDZ for an example. Like, how many contractors do you think actually understand the way that those things are intended to be installed and actually do that versus the guys that are just doing it the way that the crew has always done it?
who holds the license?
Yeah. Are we talking about the guy, the guy who holds the license, or the guy who's actually on site, or the sales guy, or the crew, or? Because I would say,
We'll
like,
leave it
in
open-ended.
terms of it actually like happening 100% to the installation instructions, I would say you're in like single digits.
Yeah.
Like percentage wise of contractors that do it that way.
I could see that.
I think they're the vast majority. I would say the majority are getting the majority of it right. But they're like, yeah, this 10% of it doesn't, those parts don't matter,
Right.
and nobody's checking, and it'll be
Well,
fine.
probably even for a perfect example, taking a shingle when you're going into your valley and cutting the 90-degree
Little dog
corner
ear.
off of a little dog ear off of the top of it in the valley to kick that water out. I mean, that was stuff I bet we started last year.
Yeah.
Because we're just, like I said, we're constantly trying to look for areas to improve and do better. And we're installing roofs leaps and bounds over where we were when we first started. But, we're forward thinking to, how can we get better? How can we get better? How can we get better? What are things that we
Well,
can
and
do?
you've got to be, because even if you knew everything perfectly right now, 6 months from now, parts of it are going to be out of date.
Correct.
Right? A year from now, 5 years from now. And so like we had, when we actually released our installation course, and I think we like put some videos out of or some,
People were telling you
some
you were doing it
screenshots
wrong?
out of what we're doing. We had guys, you're doing this wrong. I've been doing this for 30 years. I'm super double, certified and these manufacturers and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I kind of like took a second. I was like,
Let's
maybe
make
we
sure
are
we're
wrong,
not.
right? Like,
Yeah.
let me check the book, I've been wrong.
Yeah.
And fortunately we were not. And it had to do with the ice and water on the sidewalls and going on top of the synthetic instead of underneath and he was saying you had to go underneath the synthetic. And which, if you think about it, you think like a raindrop.
Correct.
No, that
Yep,
you
I
need
want it on
the
top.
the water to stay on top of the synthetic.
Yep.
But he ended up, kind of coming back and going, I posted, here's the snippet,
Yep.
here's the thing from GAF, here's the, and he ended up going, oh yeah, I guess so. But like, he probably knew all his stuff 10,
Yep.
15 years ago, 20 years ago.
And that's it too. Standards change.
Yeah.
And
Period.
should,
Yes.
to
Like,
get better.
Because materials change.
Yep.
Installation methods change. The weather changes.
Yeah.
Like
Well, even building science, if we want to get
Yeah.
nerdy, like they're discovering new things.
So, I'd never trust anybody who's like, I've been doing this for 30 years. Like,
You've been doing it wrong for
Right.
a long time.
yeah. Are you doing it the same way you were doing it 30 years ago? Because if you are,
Well, I had the very first time I did a tile roof, I was just petrified that I was going to screw something up. Right. And so like I got the instruction manual from, I think it was Boral or whoever it was that we got these tiles from. And I was just reading through every bit of it. And then we'd go out there to install, and I'd put together our material order and got all this, and the Boral rep or whatever helped me out with getting the right amount of ridge and all that stuff. And I get out there and the crew was like, yeah, we've been doing this for 25 years. We know what we're doing. Hey, your nails are too long. And I was like, no, they're not. Right. Like I had checked to make sure. And it was nails in Colorado, not screws like you'd have in Florida or whatever. But he's like, no, they're only supposed to go into the batten, not into the deck. And I was like,
we show you on page
Yeah.
47.
and he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. And they literally, like, I like left for a little while and they pulled a box of nails out of their truck. And, cause it's easier to put in a short nail than a long nail.
Yeah.
And then I got back out there and I'm like, and so I stole their nails, put them in my truck, gave them the right box. I was like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is wrong. This is going to leak. And I was like, try me.
I'll go through and start pulling their work up. Like I went to a job when we first opened and people were slap stapling the underlayment, and I went and ripped every bit of their underlayment back off, and I'm like starting back over, because we had already talked about it. It wasn't it wasn't how I told them we only will cap fasten, but I'm glad you brought up the manufacturer too before we wrap up. Is we did that, and these manufacturers, the reps should be like willing to do that stuff,
and most of them are. It's just the contractor doesn't ask.
Right. We did a presidential shake when we first started, and I'd never installed a presidential shake, and so we contacted the rep, and he was like, "Yeah, I would love to come out there and be there and show the crew." And like our crew, it was the coolest thing. I wish I had it recorded, because like the crew was engaged. They were excited that they were getting to learn some stuff, and then he was explaining the issues with how most people will install the presidential shake versus how it's designed to be installed, with the little tabs up at the top that you go and stagger. And sure enough, like our lead installer had said, like, oh, we've done a bunch of these, it's all good. And then when we got done, he was like, I've been doing it wrong this whole time, and he was so appreciative that we took the time to get some additional training on there. And then his goal on that job is to make sure that the entire crew is doing it the way that he just showed us to do. And they're not just beep, 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 going through and just racking away, and then it looks like absolute shit.
Well, I'll say the other way to kind of reverse engineer that, with specialty stuff. So I got into doing some stone coated steel and got with my rep for that. And I was like, look, like, I'm not going to go put my shingle crew installing stone coated steel. Like, this is a whole different animal. And I was like, do you have crews that you know of that, can do this? And like connected me up with a crew. When I actually had the guy I had originally that I found on my own, like the day before, he's like, oh, actually, we're going to be twice what we told you. And I was like, no, dog, that's not going to work. But we got this guy. They were.
That's one of those you're like, yeah, come on out and do it.
They were flawless. Like, I've never had like such a perfect experience. It was an insurance agent that we were doing their roof.
Oh, yes. That's
going from a cedar shake to to that stone coated steel and just like turnkey. Like
Nice.
I didn't know, I learned on that job or whatever, but your manufacturer reps for, especially the specialty stuff, they know who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong, who they've gone and done training, who they've had to fix stuff for. That's the way to go for sure.
Yeah, to your point, they have crews. Like, call the manufacturer, call the supply house.
The supply house for sure.
Supply house definitely does. I'm not saying they're good.
Yeah.
but
The
they
supply
exist.
house,
I
I would say, is
vet
going to
'em.
be hit or miss.
Yeah,
vet
but
'em. For sure.
yeah.
But those guys also know too. Like, if you have your person at ABC that you talk to all the time, and you're like, "Hey, Johnny, I need a set of guys who can do stone coated steel," and he's like, "Oh yeah, call this guy."
Yeah. How confident is he?
If he sounds confident, use that guy.
Yep.
If he's like, "Let me go check and see," I don't know.
Let me ask around.
Then
Yeah, especially if you're tight with your rep, because
That's what
they
I'm saying.
may
If
be like,
that's why
hey,
relationships are important.
this dude's a freaking rock star, or not. But another thing that I wanted to quickly touch on is the importance of like the technical bulletins as well, because like the installation instructions are incredible, but being able to use that to go above and beyond, because it'll get into different things such as like your sidewall flashing detail, or excuse me, or the fact that GAF wants their step flashing to be 5x5, but 4x4 is okay if there's a full course of leak barrier, and then you have your 5-inch sidewall lap,
or how many nails go in,
and
for
all of
Miami-Dade.
that, Yep. And so education.
That was a big thing in Texas for us. Was
BEI.
like, you had this. That's right. In BEI, we had it was constantly like the standard way of installing. But then if you wanted to have this particular wind rating, do 6 nails instead of 5, and everybody would do it, but they didn't know why. Right? It was just like, well, boss man said do 6 nails. I guess we're doing 6 nails. I don't know why.
We'll just put them wherever we feel like.
Yeah, no rhyme or reason.
Right. Well, then there's that. You
Yeah.
know,
So
we 8-nail our shingles.
let's. I think we've gone a little bit long. Let's wrap up that topic. One last thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about one of the worst tools that I've ever had, which is a pitch and slope locator. This is the old school analog version, which I got. I've had it just like floating around my toolbox since I started in roofing, because I was told that I needed something like this. And the reason I say it's one of the worst tools, not because it's not necessary, but because these are a super pain in the butt to get like an accurate reading and document. What are your thoughts? Do you use one of these?
I love them, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because if I
like
don't,
the digital ones that are long enough to span a couple of shingles. It's a little bit more to put in your tool bag, but either that or using like the roof the pitch gauge app, where you can just like screenshot it's showing the roof. It's
the only issue I have with the digital ones is the fact that they can be manipulated, because on the calibration you can set it on a pitch and calibrate it out of whack and make your roofs steeper than they actually are, and that prevents that.
Sure.
Because if that's on there, I can't really, fake that. I've seen an
Will
adjuster.
the app do that though?
It gives you the option to calibrate. Let's look into that, because I would like to check into it, because I know what you're saying is
I've never
depending
gotten
on where my
pushback
picture
on,
is,
hey, did you calibrate this differently or whatever? Like,
And
I'm
you
sure
may
if they
never.
got a different reading, then it might call into question. But
and you may never. But because I've seen an adjuster use one of those before, and he set it on the lip of the shingle above it, and he was an IA, and it made it look steeper, because he's like, I don't get a steep fee if it's below a 7, so I need it to be a little steeper. And I'm like, hey, do your thing, man. I'm just here to put the roof on that you approve. That's all I'm here to do. But getting the shadow not picking up properly is difficult on those. So yeah, we could investigate that for sure.
Yeah,
But until it gets to an 8, why do you care?
What you mean?
so you know how I am with documentation.
Yeah.
So the big issue that I have with documentation is I need to understand if it's less than an 8, then it doesn't matter, or less than a whatever, it doesn't matter. so I don't need to take this photo this time. If you tell a guy that doesn't understand why that you only have to take this photo when this,
Right.
then he's going to get used to not taking this photo. If I just tell him every time you have to take this photo, I don't care if it's a 5,
Right.
but you know, there, if it's a 3, then we need to know. If it's a 2, if it's a 5, if it's a 10, it's,
right.
You know, there's a lot of different situations where we're going to need to know. So I like the methodology of just, we're going to do that documentation every single time. And that way we have it.
Yeah. And your satellites are ballparks too, because, you know, your Eagle View may show a 4 and it's a 2.5. And so we need to have additional underlayments. If it's a 4, you know, I'm good. We can just do our normal thing. And even with a 12, you know, it may actually be a 13, and that's going to cause a difference in labor pricing and things like that. So I think it's massive to get documentation of all of your slopes.
So you're saying it's just part of your process and it's a standard. I love that.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please join us, subscribe to this channel, come back, watch our next video. If you enjoy this type of training, check out Building Experts Institute, buildingexperts.institute. We've got in-depth, expert-led, and beautifully produced courses that will help you better understand the technical side to roofing and insurance claims. We'll see you guys next time.